Taxation. Jack, would you call the roll?
Aye. Here.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Quincy. Vice President Tab. President Wheeler.
Present. Well, we have gathered here to do some important work today. We're going to be setting the maximum levy that the City Council can do. And I believe we need to have somebody make a motion. Do we have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move the mayor's recommended budget for consideration of setting the maximum levy.
Do we have a second? There's been a motion made and seconded that we adopt the levy. And now we're open for discussion, and we've got some updated information that has been provided to us. Jack, will you want to run through that for us?
Yes. It's important to remember that the pay 2015 taxes are based on the January 2nd, 2014 valuations. So any increases in property since January 2nd of this year, or any new construction since January 2nd of this year, won't be reflected until payable 16 taxes. We have 55,442 homesteaded parcels in our data group that we follow. Approximately 57% of these will experience a tax decrease in their city component for pay 15 compared to 14. Of these parcels, 77%, or 42,000 plus, will pay less property taxes to the city in 2015 than they paid in 2012. That suggested resolutions are provided, which is the information where the budget recommended levies based on the motion will be inserted for the appropriate transmittal to the county.
Thank you very much. I think a good way to proceed, I hope everybody on the board will take a moment to share with each other sort of your thoughts, but I think probably the best place to start is with the mayor, who is the one who's bringing forward this budget for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to have this conversation and for people giving consideration to the property tax levy that I proposed in my budget in August. There are three main drivers of what I'm suggesting here. The first is inflation. Unless we levy for inflation, a 0% increase is a cut, because unless we levy more money than we levied the year before, we will get the exact same amount of money as the year before. Unlike the state, we do not have an inflation factor in our budget. And so the fact that in the last few years we've done either a cut, a zero, or a not inflationary increase, we have essentially been doing cutting at the city of Minneapolis, and I voted for those, and it's completely appropriate. One of the downsides of that, though, is that if you accumulate that over time, you get further and further behind on whether or not you can pay for your current service levels. It is an accumulated cut that we have to account for year after year. So over half of the proposed increase today is just for inflation and to pay for what we are currently doing now, and that was one of the biggest drivers in the proposal that is before you. One of the second drivers in the proposal before you is making sure that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board has what they need to take care of their own bottom line, meaning there are some expenses that the park board is going to incur, both in terms of health care and in terms of minimum wage increases, which they have, in both of those instances, some particular expenses that they will have given the makeup of their employees. And I think Commissioner Tab can speak more clearly to that. But in years past, the park board and the city have gone in together on the levy and the sort of proposed increase in the levy. And that has been standard operating procedure. But this year, hearing and knowing the level of need that the parks are facing, I wanted to make sure that the proposed levy could accommodate what what they are looking at. I don't know where the park board will land on what they see their needs as, but I know that they are contemplating a 4.9% increase, which in this budget is about 0.5% of the proposed tax levy increase. And I think that that's an important investment to make for the city of Minneapolis, not just for our parks, but for the city of Minneapolis. The needs are high, and I want to account for that in this year so they can build up their base to account for these new expenses. And of course, the last piece is some increase to make some investments that we collectively as a city spent all last year talking about. Investments in particular in equity, which I outlined in my budget address, but also in public safety. And that our ability to make the public safety investments we want, to have community policing, to have a department that we have to do hiring for, but to make sure that that hiring and those new officers reflect the community that they serve, and to make sure that we can do the accountability measures, including body cams, for accountability both for the community and for the department. Those are investments, and important investments that were a consideration as I outlined in my budget address. But particularly some of the investments around equity require new investment, although there are a number of things that we can do and that departments are already moving forward on. And so this gives the City Council an opportunity to deliberate on the budget that I proposed, and gives them some, gives them the ability to account for inflation and to consider new programs as well. So I understand that it is I, more than anybody, understand the property tax questions that we have been asked, and I understand that that it is something we are asking. It's an investment we're asking our residents to make. The advantage of growth. And we are in a high growth period. We met our over $1 billion worth of development permits this summer. We didn't hit that landmark until October last year. The benefit of growth is that our tax capacity does increase. And what that means is that when we do levy or we do increase a levy, either way, that it is spread out over more properties. It's an absolute dollar amount. But what has changed is the number of properties over which we spread that dollar amount, which means that the feels like factor, people's experience of that increase is not as dire as people fear or sometimes predict without all the information. That the feels like factor, and we talked about this at the hearing, is relatively low for most people in the city. But the investments that we need to make, as well as the inflationary adjustments and the investments in the park, are investments that we spent a long time talking about last year, and they are investments that I feel I was clearly given the imprimatur to move forward. So I ask folks for their support for this maximum tax levy. Of course, that also gives the City Council room if they choose to make cuts to that, but this is the maximum. It's the maximum. So I ask for folks' support. I appreciate the consideration, and I look forward to the great work we can do together.
Thank you, Mayor Hodges. And we certainly are open to hearing, I hope, from each and every person who is here. Who would like to go first?
I would like to thank Mayor Hodges for her consideration of the parks. I come from a district where it's difficult to raise taxes, but I think that Mayor Hodges has mentioned a few things that really are inescapable truths. Inflation, for the park board, that healthcare costs and the minimum wage costs will also hit us very hard. We have a very large seasonal workforce, a very significant seasonal workforce. So that's a big part of what we do, and that is very important. I also want to point out that 0.9% of this increase for the park board does go directly to trees. We have had a very difficult time with trees in this city over the past many years. It just seems like all the forces are against us, whether it has been windstorms and damage, whether it has been emerald ash borer, or whether it has been Dutch elm disease. It has just been a very difficult time for trees in our city. And yet we know that that is one of the very top priorities of the people in this city. So our proposal has been every year to levy about a 0.9% tax increase to be able to replace the trees that we are losing every year. And we expect that it will be this year plus another 6 years, because we did it once last year, for us to really get back into the mode where we are, that our normal budget covers the tree replacement that needs to just normally be done. So let's all pray that we won't have any more big events that take out trees. So from the park board perspective, I am supportive of this budget, and I very much appreciate the mayor's allowing us to go to our maximum levy. The other one thing I would like to say is, unfortunately for the park board, this levy really sort of just keeps us even. And I think one of the things that we have to face at both the park board and the city is the fact that we have infrastructure that is in desperate need of repair. Both of us do. And I think we're going to have to come to grips with that very soon. And these kinds of budgets, while we make some progress, don't make the kind of progress that many of our residents would like. So thank you. So with that, I will just say that I will be voting in favor of this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment, as the city, through the Ways and Means Committee and the Budget Committee, has just begun its process of evaluating the budget as we started our budget hearings. So there's a lot of information that still needs to come out and understand. But I just wanted to comment that I think the levy itself that's been in front of us today, not the individual line items within the budget, because that's not what we're going to be deliberating about today. I think it's very responsible. I think it's well reasoned. I think the largest cost drivers, obviously, the mayor outlined the need to account for inflation, and the biggest single percentage is the debt levy, which was the responsibility of the city over the last decade to make some critical investments in our infrastructure, and those infrastructure improvement projects that were so vital at the time. Those bills are coming due. So this really puts a lot of constraint on the budget in and of itself, because the city's general levy, or the general fund levy, is actually down 1.5%. So as our committee and council deliberates over the budget, we're going to be faced with, if we're going to be reducing the levy, or if we're going to be reducing and making cuts, where are we going to be those cuts coming from, and how are we going to make those exchanges? Those are part of the process going forward for the next several months. But I think at this point, setting the maximum levy at 2.4% is, as I indicated before, well-reasoned and certainly responsible and in the best interests of the city. So I'm in support of that motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Quincy, for your good words. Who would like to speak next? Okay. Councilmember Johnson, President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting the mayor's request today, but I just really want to make it clear we had a bit of a change in our budget process, and that all of us on the council are now part of the budget committee, and it's my intention to pay close attention to the budget as it's being presented and look for opportunities to reduce the levy below this maximum amount. I, of course, will have to get 6 people to agree with me, which isn't always easy. But I think we have the opportunity to do the deep dive into the information that's been presented by the budget office, and we'll be doing that and see where it goes.
Thank you so much. And I have a feeling, Carol, you might want the.
I think I'm left.
Well, I'm next to you, but go ahead, Councilmember Becker.
I will not be supporting this today. for a couple of really simple reasons. First thing is that I've been talking for the last 4 or 5 years about the need for capital investment in our parks and on our streets. The pavement condition index has dropped from 88% of the streets, 88% of the neighborhood streets being in good condition to 73% in 2011. For all streets, it's gone from 82% to 73%. If you think the potholes are worse, they really are worse. It's not just your imagination. And the parks, we spend $4 million a year on all the neighborhood parks, all of the buildings, all of the fields, all of the play equipment. I have an 8-year-old. We use the parks a lot. And the capital infrastructure is just not keeping up. And I believe we need to make investments in those sorts of areas before we start making investments in others. Just the basic need to keep up with what a city is: streets, parks, those sorts of things. I also am concerned that in other parts of the budget, something that we're not actually going to be voting on, there's an $8 million increase in the solid waste fee, which comes out of the exact same pocket as the property taxes do. There's not a separate pocket for that. And if we're going to spend $8 million, I think it should be going first to streets and parks before we start expanding other programs. And for those reasons, I'm not going to be supporting this. Thank you.
Member, it was a bit of a mistake.
I was trying to decide, was I getting promoted or not?
Okay,
and so the council members can tell me if it's yes or a no.
Probably, I think it's the voters have something to do with that, so that may be another time and place. This is the 5th year I've served on the Board of Investment and Taxation, and really, there's just sort of 2 things that we do. One is the capital bonding, which helps to pay for the infrastructure improvements around the city, the sewers and streets and all that kind of stuff. And the other is we get to set a maximum levy that the council can spend up to that amount. In my first year, it was proposed to raise the levy about close to 8%. And I came up with the concept of 4%. The elected folk, the voters got kind of upset, and it dropped down to 4.8%. And then we've had some sort of declining amounts. One year we were 0, and last year we actually went down 1%. There has been a rebound in the economy. That doesn't mean it's good for everybody. Very clearly it isn't yet. But there has been an amazing amount of construction. We have an opportunity to begin to make up a little bit of ground in terms of what has been lost to inflation. I think Mayor Hodges laid it out very clearly about sort of the 3 priorities. Our job, and our only job, is to set a maximum levy. And we could do some due diligence and visit as non-city council members with those who are city council members and who are going to be making decisions. I think it's wise to set it at a maximum at 2.4%. I will be supporting that in my vote today. And I expect there's going to be a healthy and spirited process between now and when we end up with a final budget. People think that numbers aren't really very sexy. But what they, I'm looking at a couple of people who work in the finance department, and they're like, what? What do you mean? But they really are, because what they represent aren't numbers. They represent the fact that this is a city who is growing and working and making a difference in our neighborhoods and for our businesses and for our parks and for all sorts of things. So this is really serious and important stuff, and it can actually be a tiny bit fun too. So with that, does anybody else have a word that they would like to offer before we go to a vote? Jack, would you call the roll?
Nay.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Quincy.
Aye.
Vice President Tab. President Wheeler.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes, 1 nay. The motion passes. The appropriate numbers will be inserted in the Truth and Taxation and the Charter resolutions per the adopted motion.
Do we have any other directions for staff or business that we need to conduct at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will see you later.